Today's guest is emerging writer Beth Mosch. She initially reached out for virtual coffee over Zoom to ask about breaking into animation. Her questions were so good, she was so well prepared, we decided to turn it into an Ask Me Anything episode. Everything from writing advice to career building to all that in between. We cover what's in the minds of writers like her trying to break in. Here we go. All right. This is the Story Series, the podcast for writers who break the rules. Beth Mosch, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Before we get to your questions, I thought we can give everyone like a quick sense of where you're at in your own writing journey.
Yes, yeah. So I graduated USC in film and TV production a couple years ago. Graduated into the strikes, so it was definitely a hard time to find work and everything, but picked up, PA gigs, office, sets, whatever I could. Started my own business in the meantime and did some traveling. And now I'm kind of at this point of coming back and really wanting to find those first opportunities to, write and get my foot in the door. And I do work on projects with some friends. Like I have a writing partner from USC, and like we're working on this like really cool like hockey pilot together. So there's lots of things between that and features that I'm doing just to kind of stay creatively fueled and everything while on the job hunt.
Where do you want to end up in the industry? Do you know exactly yet?
Yeah, I would love to be a showrunner. That's like the ultimate goal for me. So anything like writing, producing, any combination of that or one or the other, I'm always really drawn to. And I think above else, it's just a good story I love. But I love animation too, which is part of why I reached out to you as well. So
Fantastic. Well, I feel like I was exactly where you were at in some ways not too long ago. And I know a ton of other people are as well. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to have this discussion. So why don't we jump into some of your questions?
for sure. So I think one of the biggest things me and probably a lot of writers breaking in would love to know is just like what are the actionable things we can do to like get our foot in the door and get that first opportunity besides just the typical like networking, reaching out to people, having those chats like you and I did.
I think like up front when we talk about networking, it's a little annoying because it's like you should be networking and it's like, okay, but you're just meeting people and then what? And I think just to like up top define networking as a way to develop relationships, not just meet people, but develop so the people that you meet, I always stress the importance of following up. Anyone that you meet becomes someone that you should follow up with either in the weeks ahead or a month ahead, or just let that person know what you're up to and what you're doing and remind them of what you're looking for. And I think if you do that with one person times however many that you meet and that you network with, that increases your luck.
I think there's always starting off, especially there's the fear of like, oh, I don't want to come off as like pestering them too much or being, too all over the place. But like, yeah, I think as I've gone over time, kind of found that good happy medium of everything of like, okay, like this is a good cadence and everything of like when to reach out again and give updates and whatnot. But it can be a lot too. Like there's a lot of people and lots of things and life just keeps going. But yeah.
Yes, I would say anyone that takes the time to meet with you would appreciate hearing from you again.
Hmm.
And even if it's down the road, hey, I'm doing this, and I think, and that's how a relationship is slowly built. Everyone is worried about bothering people, but there's no list that you're going to be on that's like this person bothers people, don't hire them. It's not true. Just
Right.
do it.
Hmm.
People appreciate the follow up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. What do you think for you is the difference of reading like a good sample and one that actually gets you staffed and gets the job? Like that kind of difference. What really stands out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. When it comes to samples, that could be tough. There are two kinds of samples. There's an original sample, so your own work, and then there's a sample of like you're writing an episode of Bluey. You're specking an existing show. I think when you're specking an existing show, the way to stand out is to really capture the voice of the show. Because if you can capture the voice of an existing show, then chances are you can capture the voice of this show that we're looking at right now to hire people. But in terms of an original sample, and how do you stand out amongst the stack? First, that's the time to follow up. Whoever you send it to, I would absolutely follow up because I guarantee out of those 50 people that have sent their script, most of them are not following up because they're of the mindset of, well, they'd get back to me if they were interested. And do not think that. Like that, it's just because there's so many people that you can't possibly get back to everyone. It doesn't mean that they've made their decision. So I would go back to that following up, and that goes, oh, this person followed up. They seem on it. What was their script? And then they would go right to your script and crack it open. And then how do you hook them for an original? If you just present a complete vision and what that means to you, I think that's the best way to get noticed.
What are the things you can do besides just talking to people, and I guess making them aware that, you're interested in writing, like to get them to ask to like send you their work?
The question is, how do you get someone to read your
Want
work?
to read your work and like interested in potentially hiring you?
I would say the best way to do that is for you to be clear in what you want. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want directly. And of course, do it politely, but people think that that they're afraid to ask. But people on the other side don't always have the time to try to figure out what you want. But I find that in my experience, people want to help, but they need to know how to help you.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's helpful, I guess, because along the same lines of like the kind of the limiting beliefs or the things that people might come up with to not kind of push themselves, but like you have to be your own biggest advocate with all of this. Like no one's gonna just do it for you.
No, but they want to know how to help you. And
Yeah,
that's really it. And
exactly.
yeah, and so don't limit your beliefs like that. Don't hold yourself back. But we all have that, no matter at all different stages. It exists, but you have to get past that for sure.
Hmm.
We've all been there.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess then with those younger writers or the ones you see kind of starting off, like what is some like the biggest mistakes you see those people making, like when trying to break in?
People are afraid to get pigeonholed before they've even gotten paid to do any writing work. Like, I don't want to, if I go down this path, am I going to be stuck there forever? And therefore they stay in this kind of indecision where they just kind of linger. I say you should try to get pigeonholed. That's a good problem to have. If you keep getting paid to do something, to do a certain kind of
Right.
writing,
Yeah.
get that problem and then figure out your way out of it, right? Because you'll
Yeah.
always encounter higher class problems or whatever, right? But get that thing. So don't worry about being pigeonholed. And beyond that, you should definitely have things that you finished. You should have things that you finished, whether it's a short film or a short script or an 11-minute script or whatever you want to write. You should have things that you finished. It doesn't mean you need to finish everything that you write, because you could free write, you could do that, you could throw it away, you could do this, but there's insights that you get from just finishing things and things that you learn by just getting to the end of a project that you don't get if you just go halfway and then keep doing halfway everywhere. So do your best to finish things.
That's, yeah. I think one other bigger thing, like starting off too, and especially writers today versus maybe when you started off, like the landscape, like social media as a thing is like such a different thing than like anything, in other times. But you see more and more, especially younger people like me, we're, scrolling and we start seeing like writers that are popping up on our feeds and like they're building these brands for themselves, like these personal brands on social media. Like you have this podcast too, so you're kind of doing that in a different way. Do you feel like building a personal brand like through social media is like an important thing for future writers?
First, it's worth saying the most important thing you can do is to write. There's nothing more important than having a great script. That's just the key thing. And so, in terms of developing a personal brand, if you're creating things, if you're an animator or if like you're a filmmaker and you're putting things online, that could be fantastic because you're doing things and you're reaching other people. And so there's value in that because you're doing. Um, in terms of starting a personal brand because you feel like you have to, I don't think it's for that reason. There's nothing where if I'm presented with two great scripts and one of them has a personal brand, I'll go with this person. That's not the case. And if you're looking to get into the studio system, like at a Disney or Nickelodeon or whatever, or pick your movie studio, It's
Right.
always going to be down to who you are as a person in the writer's room and on the page. Beyond that, it's great to talk about because that also is part of you. If you have a personal brand and you put up short animations or whatever, that's things that you can talk about, and that adds value just because it rounds you out as a person when you're just meeting someone. But beyond that, I don't think it's a must.
Right. Yeah. Like if there's an idea or you're inspired by something, it can be a great tool if you're passionate about it and sharing it. But I think that's something I see a lot too is like, oh, like having maybe it's different also like TV versus features, because a lot of these people sometimes are saying like, oh, like if you're pitching a feature script to a studio, the fact that you have like a built-in audience of what, like if it's 100K or this or that, like that, then that's kind of ensuring more eyeballs will potentially get onto this thing. But I don't know if again that is maybe a difference between features and
Right. I think there's definitely value to what you're saying in that way, especially if people sometimes want to crowdfund certain parts of the production, and so they're developing an audience that way, or they're documenting what they're doing to try to have a following. I think that is in support of a larger piece of work or vision. Then there's something there, but again, that serves the purpose of getting the film made, not because you think you have to have a personal brand. But if it's part of your end goal, then I think it's worth considering that online
right,
following, whatever that is for you. Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And it's helpful to think about the way of like, okay, are you passionate? Are you excited about this? Then sure, go for it. But it doesn't have to be the future that everyone has to have like for filmmaking going forward, which some
Right.
people kind of go that way, but I definitely think with everything it's like the balance. There's a happy medium to it all, and like, you just have to go with what your gut says about it. When you come up with like a story problem that you're stuck on, like do you have any like go-to strategies or like approaches to having a breakthrough?
Yes. So I'll tell you, being in TV, the deadline is the technique. The deadline is the tool that you use to get an idea. So it goes back to that idea of doing. I think so often if you're stuck or writer's block, whatever, it goes back to that indecision. It's not that you don't have any ideas, it's that you don't know which one to write down. And so I think getting it from your head to the page is so important. Write down like the worst draft ever. Like just but finish it. Write the beginning, middle, and end. Write what has to happen. Write no one's gonna look over your shoulder. Like get those voices out of your head. I call it the draft that'll get me fired. Write the first draft, but it's horrible and that's fine. But you need to get it from your head to the page, and then you start working with it. And it's a way different experience because you're not wallowing in indecision, right? You're getting it down. So I think part of what separates a professional writer or what you start to develop is you know that you can write badly because you're going to rewrite the bad writing and make it better. And we've all heard writing is rewriting, right? Well, that's what it
Exactly.
means. That's what that becoming, having those professional habits means. So just write the bad version down and then make it better on the page, I think. And that deadline helps because you know it's coming up. So you're forcing yourself to write it down. And that matters, that doing, you know.
Yeah. No, I definitely find like for me, like when I have a writing partner or something, like, I mean, of course, I'm not in these rooms yet to have like all of these people around, but even just having one person where it's like you can go in and like trust there's like this zero judgment, like no idea is a bad idea, like just like word vomit, brainstorm it out. Like it helps so much to like know you have even just one person to do that with. And like,
Yes.
I have found like, yeah, having a partner or like just someone like really helps you get unstuck so quick in those
Yes.
situations.
And the language that you're using, like the word vomit or the bad, no bad idea, that's exactly what we say in the writers' rooms, where it's
Mm.
like, okay, the bad version is this. You're all keeping the ball in the air. And
Right.
then
Just keep it going,
yes,
keep the momentum going of like,
yes.
yeah, yeah,
It's a judgment-free zone. It is. It
right.
really is. And so that's great. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely like sometimes in school, especially if you're in like a classroom, depending on the people that are around you, sometimes you're like, oh, like if I say something, it has to be like really insightful or smart. And then it's like, but then, you find the friends or the group that you know you can trust and aren't going to like judge you or talk behind your back or anything. And then it's like, okay, we can just talk this out and like not have that fear of it having to be the perfect thing that we
Yes.
say.
Yeah, especially like when I was like an assistant writer in the room and I was taking notes and I would have something, I would think I would be afraid to say it because what if it's bad? And then they're going to be like, why is he talking?
They're like, why did we
That's what,
hire him? Or
yeah,
like, yeah,
exactly. And that's all this up here. And we all have it. But yeah, yeah, you have to push past it, but it's normal.
yeah. Glad to know. Yeah,
Yes.
that feeling is common.
Yeah. No one ever says anything perfect all the time. So
Right. Going kind of along with practicing and, continuing to write and everything, like, do you have any routines or things to kind of like keep you creatively sharp, like whether it's daily practices or like every week or whatnot, like even with all the deadlines and kind of work that is going on that makes things chaotic?
it goes back to like why you fell in love with it in the first place, which is reading, whether it's reading books or watching films, whether it's trying to watch the new stuff or back to some old favorites that you haven't seen in a while. But I call that like you're like replenishing your soul a little bit.
Right.
And that's easy to kind of skip for a period of time because you can get so busy and all that. But it's important to do. And and also just beyond all that, like, everyone has their non-writing hobbies like exercise or whatever it is, just to mentally reset, I find is really helpful. But yeah, it's really those basic things.
Right. Yeah.
Do
No,
you
whenever
find anything?
for me, I've always been into like working out. I was like a former athlete, like D1 athlete. So like anytime I can just kind of like move my body, I feel like it can help like move my mind and like, get different ideas flowing, like get the creative juices going as they say or whatever. So like
Yes.
yeah, like going whether it's a run or a walk or like I love to surf or, play hockey, like whatever it is, I always feel like when I can maybe take a pause from something if I'm in a weird headspace and like just change my what I'm doing and then come back to it, it can do wonders.
I think like there's a lot of pressure to work all the time, or it's easy to feel like you're working all the time because it's a hard, especially in a creative field, it's hard to turn off your mind. You can quote unquote clock out, but you're still thinking about it, or you have like a short film that's coming up that you want to do, or whatever. It can feel like you're always working. And so it is important to shut that off and not feel guilty about it.
Also, I'm kind of curious with writing like for kids specifically, are there any like times where you had like a specific like storytelling rule or convention that like you intentionally broke and like how did that go for you?
Ooh, like a creative rule
Creative
to
rule,
break.
yeah, yeah, and like you either did that, especially for I don't know whether it was kids animation that's like, oh, you typically don't do that, and like that process, and did it actually
Yeah.
get in, and like
So in kids TV, you have to generate a lot of ideas for episodes and you submit a handful of ideas at a time to the network called Springboards. Most of them will not, maybe not most, but a lot of them will get killed. Like no to this one, no to this one. So you have to be generating a lot of ideas. And one thing that I like to do was, even though it's like kids cartoons, I would love to, and maybe it's because I fell in love with film in college, but like to think cinematically, to think of big action set pieces or big famous sequences from films and see how that could be adapted into preschool, and never forgetting who the script or the demographic is, but is there a way to take this big idea and adapt it into preschool? I would find that would be helpful when coming up with new ideas. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the filmmaker Werner Herzog,
mm,
a German filmmaker. He has a
yeah.
famous film from the 70s called Fitzcarraldo, where he's taking a steamship over a mountain. And it's like shot like it's not CG or anything. Like he's really taking a whole steamship up a mountain. And I pitched an idea in this one show about the characters having to take a whale over this mountain. And it was something that made it sense in the show, but I like referenced that scene and I was like, oh, maybe we could do. And so I think it depends how you think, but as it being more visual, I tend to write visually and think of the edit in my head. And
Right.
so I always love trying to write cinematically in preschool. I think that you can, there's so much to do in preschool. If there's a rule I break, it's to not limit preschool. Like some people will ask like, "Oh, are you bored of it or do you want to go older?" And it's like I'll try to write for older kids once I get bored, but there's so much to do. But thinking big in the kids space,
Yeah, no, I
not
love
writing
that.
down, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when it's like they think kids, it's like talking down and like, yeah, there's certain things that are like too high level or too adult, but like, there are things one of the biggest examples I think of is like Bluey with like the sign when they did like the 30-minute episode. And
Amazing.
that's like, it was like based on like this, like, I think it was like this old proverb, and it was like, and it's a lesson that even adults can learn from to this day, but it's like can make sense to kids too, and they can understand it as well. So it's, I think, kind of like what you were saying with the steamboat turned to whale, like
Right,
it's
right.
it's just like how can you translate and adapt it to like reach a wider audience to like understand that same message.
The Lion King, for example, right? The Disney in the mid 90s. I remember they would show like the making of on TV, and they would bring a lion into the studio, or and the artist would study a real lion. The artist didn't study other animation, they studied life. And so even if you want to write for kids, take inspiration from life, not by kind of presupposing how you're supposed to talk to them, right? Like take big ideas, take a real lion and adapt it into a kids movie. It's that kind of thinking that I think makes for the best kind of kids television.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're not drawing from life, like it's like that's our most authentic source of inspiration. So yeah. No,
Yes.
I love that answer. That was great. Are there any like bigger misconceptions that you find people have with kids animation?
Yeah, I think the misconception is that you can't do anything, that it's too limiting, and that people get turned off by what they think are restrictions. And so it's like, well, it's preschool, so you have to dumb it down. There's no story, and it's blah blah blah. And I think that's the biggest misconception. I think that what if anything, what preschool and kids TV has taught me is how fun restrictions are. I think the first thing that you should do, no matter what kind of writing job you have on any show, is to draw a box around the show. This is the world of the show. It could be preschool, it could be older, it could be, an adult show, like an adult drama, but there's always a sandbox. And you have to push as far as you can within that box and see where the boundaries are, but to push it, not to say, okay, here's the box, but I can only do this instead. It's like you have to push a little bit. What restrictions do is cause you to think of things you wouldn't normally have thought of. Like if someone sits down and says, write me a story, you're gonna be like, oh, what do I do? But if it's like, write me a story with this and this and this and this, you're gonna think of something and write something that you would not have come up with. And so again, it's embrace the restrictions. Don't fight them. Find out how you can use them and have fun with it.
Also, kind of going into like for you, whether I don't know if it was recently or like earlier in your career, can you think of a time where you got a really impactful like piece of advice or feedback from someone like related to screenwriting and what that might have been?
There's one that comes to mind that's a practical piece of writing advice that I still do today. So it's that I rarely ever start with a blank page. So this is related to TV and the TV pipeline. So I mentioned we submit springboards to the network, like paragraphs of ideas. And then one of those will get through. And then that becomes a story that we break as a writer's room. And from there, that one writer takes it and they write the premise, they write the outline, and then the script. So each time it gets a little bit longer. So what this head writer told me was what he does at each level is when it's time to write, let's say, the premise, he'll take part of the springboard and he'll copy and paste it in the premise document just to have something to move around, right? Because it's all about getting it from here to the page. Once you can move it around on the page, you're in much better shape. And then he'll add to it, of course, because it's not complete. Then when it goes to outline, so he has a premise, it's like a page and a half. It goes to outline to network. They say yes, it goes to outline. So now he takes the premise and he breaks up the premise into the outline. So this top part of the premise is the opening scene, and then so there's a beginning, middle, and end. So there's of course going to be things that are missing because each step it gets longer. But now he has rough bones for an outline, and you can kind of see beginning, middle, and end. You can see where things are lacking. And then when it comes time to do the script, outline goes to network. Network gives you notes. It's time to do the script. You open up final draft. You have this empty document. He takes the outline and he pastes it into final draft, and he starts moving it around. This is the heading, this is the opening, this is the dialogue. And there's a way, I think it's like Apple R, where you could literally go, this is dialogue, this is action, and he'll
Yeah,
start
yeah.
mapping it out. Yeah, yeah. He'll start just turning the outline into the bad version of the script. Now,
Mm,
it's not going to be as long as a script, obviously, because an outline's
right.
shorter, but it's the bones again. And so much of screenwriting is page real estate. You need to know how long you have for a particular scene, or how you're ending, and sometimes work backwards. And so what I like to do is literally that. I'll copy and paste the previous step into the next step, and I'll move it around, and then I'll add to it, rewrite. Doesn't matter if it completely changes. It's that I didn't have to start with a total blank page. I started with some sort of like skeleton and then improved upon it from there. And so that is like a piece of advice that I still use, that when I tell people that I work with, they're like, "What? That's amazing. That's great." And so I'm like, that's the thing
Mm,
that is worth it, because yeah, not the blank page is what can stop a lot of people. You
yeah,
just throw it
yeah.
in there, and then you get the bad version, and the bad version is great because then you can improve it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The fear of like just staring at a blank page is so real. But yeah, I feel like sometimes people like they don't want to put in maybe the work before to make the outline and like get to that point, but it's like it's so helpful for that process and just keep things going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so and make each step help you in the next step. Like
Right.
you're already doing the work. So just
Yeah.
take it, and then you can change it completely, but you have something to go off of.
Hmm.
Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
have to start over fresh each time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Going back to like when you're talking about springboards, is that
Mhm.
something that you just write those or does everyone in the room or like how can you like just kind of like walk through and break down that process of like
Yes.
all of that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So any given kids TV season, you might have 50 11-minute episodes, let's say. That's like kind of standard, give or take. And so you need 50 episode ideas. So the head writer will take the staff writers and brainstorm ideas. Just anything, and some of them start to pop, and then you go, "Okay, can you turn that into a springboard, which is like a paragraph." One writer will typically write it. It'll go to the head writer. Here's the paragraph. The head writer will look at it, make any necessary adjustments, and then it'll go to network. And maybe it'll go to network with like 3 or 4 because they're short, and you'll get notes back. And sometimes they'll say, "This is a pass because of doesn't feel preschool relatable. It doesn't feel that whatever, or we've done this in another show and it wasn't successful." There's a million reasons that things
Right.
die, or they're just a germaphobe and they don't want to do a show about germ, like whatever. And then some will move forward. Yes, this can go, but make sure you do this. Or if you can change this, go ahead and move forward. And then you repeat that X amount of times to get all your episodes filled. And then once it gets approved, then it goes into a story break. You put it on the whiteboard, and it's literally act 1, 2, and 3, A B C D, and then you start to flesh out the structure of the story and jokes and gags and things like that. Yeah, and you do
Gotcha.
it 50 times.
Going more into like the rooms and everything. So like I know some things are remote, some things are in person, but like regardless, for you kind of being in more of this leadership role now, like how do you foster like that kind of safe space where people feel free to share any ideas and kind of that environment or mindset of like no idea is a bad idea and just brainstorming.
Leading by example. Like I'll have plenty of bad ideas. And so if I have bad ideas, it's like it gives other people permission to have bad ideas too.
Right.
And so you're really relying on the group think. And it's almost like volleyball, where it's like you don't have to score, but just try to keep the ball up. And it's like, well,
Right.
that reminded me of it. And then and so if you can set that tone early on, so I
Right.
think that's really the ways that you want to do that.
Right, because I think that's can be definitely like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like something that can vary from, room to room, different shows because of like, you know, I mean, for assistance, first of all, it's like you're lucky, like you're glad to just get into the room, and it's like, oh, I don't want to do anything to risk potentially like getting fired. And it's like kind of that like walking that line of like, okay, like I do have ideas and like I want to be helpful and like,
Yeah.
contribute, but also like, finding that line or like knowing when to say something and when to maybe not, and like at what point in that process to know like, okay, now I can maybe speak up or pitch
Yeah,
something.
that's a great point. I think that if you're in that environment, pulling the head writer aside or whoever the boss is and say, hey, if I have something, like, can I throw it out there? You could do that and bring up the
Okay.
conversation yourself. Typically, the reputation in animation is that people are nicer. Like
Yeah,
that's just the
right.
thing, is they're
Yeah.
more open. And so chances are in animation, you're going to be in an environment that is more welcoming on average than like what you might get in live action. I haven't worked in live action, but that's just the reputation I hear, is that people in
Yeah, I
animation are
hear
nicer.
things from friends of like, yeah, like live action versus animation. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, there's
that's
plenty of bad bosses and, bad environments. And so there's things outside of your control. But yeah, yeah,
yeah, no, that's yeah, it's glad to be in kind of the animation space because that's no, I love, working in that. And yeah, the people I've always met seem to be so fun and nice and just
for sure.
down to
Yeah.
earth. Like say today, like if you were hiring like a room for a show and you had like two equally talented writers and one had a unique voice but maybe less experience, and one had like one was more technically solid, what and maybe more safe, like who would you pick and why?
Well, my knee jerk reaction, not overthinking it, was to go with the one with the unique voice because technically solid, anyone can learn the technical side. That's what school teaches you. The technical is like fade in and it's scene headings and it's this and that. And you could learn that. It's harder to learn a unique voice. And so I think a unique voice is something that you discover within yourself and it's just different for everybody. So my knee jerk reaction was to be more inclined to try to develop the talent of the person with the unique voice rather than just the person who's playing it safe.
Gotcha. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And it's like, I think of, I mean, I have a sports background too. So it's like, I think of in a sport, it's like you can't teach speed per se if you're like really fast and it's just like that is something given to you. Like you can learn the mechanics of stick handling and like where to position yourself. But like there's certain factors that it's like aren't as easily teachable.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And to build on that a little bit more, what I always like to do is to have a summit at the beginning of every show, and sometimes maybe in the second half of the season or once every season, or where you invite writers to. It's like a giant writers room, and you're looking for springboard ideas, and so, but it's a way, like maybe it's 10 writers or it's 6 or 7 or it's 5 on this day, 5 on the next day, and that's your chance to try out people that you have a hunch about and see how they are in the room. And then going away from the summit, maybe you're asking everyone to expand on their ideas. And so you could test out the technical person, you can test out the one with the unique voice and work with each of them a little bit and see how they are. And then maybe give them a freelance. And because you might staff up, but there's always freelance opportunity. Well, not always, but typically there's freelance opportunities. And so you have your writers that you want to try out, your writers that are newer that you want to give a shot to, your writers that are super experienced that you want to like balance it out, because as a head writer, if someone doesn't come through, you spend a lot of time rewriting. And so you have to balance with like new people experienced and go from there. And you always have people in the wings where you're like, okay, if this person drops out or something happens or they, whatever, I know this freelancer can do it and this person knows the show. So in a perfect world, I would take both of those writers that you gave the example about and bring them into a summit and give them a chance to show everyone and the head writer what they got.
Gotcha. With sorry, this idea of like a summit, is that something
Yeah,
that happens before every show or like season, or like
if you're
how does that
lucky.
process work?
So I asked for it. And if you
Okay.
ask, again, it's one of those things, ask for what you want. You might not always get it, but ask. And what you're paying for is like everybody gets a day rate. and maybe lunch if it's all in person, and it's like a 4 hour thing. And it's a great way to kick off the show because you get a bunch of different ideas, and you can try different people out. And so and some of those people might be on staff, some of them might be future freelancers, and then some of them might be like, oh, this person didn't quite work out or whatever. It's your chance. So it's not a given every show, but it's common, but it's not a given. And so if it exists, if it happens, it's very nice.
And how many people, like at least in your experience, are typically invited to this summit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you want to balance it because too many voices means you don't hear from anyone, right? Like you hear
Yeah.
from everyone once, and that's not enough time to get to know people. So if it's like 5 and 5 is a good, five prospective writers on day one, five different ones on day two. And at each summit, you might have one or two executives from the show listening in just to see. You have the head writer, maybe the executive producer, and not everyone's talking. You want the focus to be on the writers, but it's it could easily go up to 8 or 9 people in the room with five people that you want to hear from. So yeah, and like 4 hours is like a good. By the end of it, you're kind of mentally like fried because you've
You're right.
just all these ideas, and so you want to consider that not too many people find the sweet spot, so you could hear from people multiple times. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind. And when you're like inviting people into this, is it just you making that decision, or like are you talking with other people? Like kind of who is involved in that process, or is it just you?
No, not just the head
Yeah,
writer.
it's like
Everyone has recommendations. The network has recommendations.
yeah.
People, yes, it's all the above. So as the head writer, you hopefully you have somewhat of a final say because you're putting the team together, and you're going to live or die by their work, and
Yeah.
it's their work that goes through you that then goes to the network. So you want to make sure this is the team you want, but you always have to consider other voices, and especially the network. They might recommend someone and you're like, ooh, that person's really good. And so you have
Right.
to be open, but also this is your team and you're going to live or die by them. So it should be your final say, but there's a lot of voices.
Right. Yeah. So like with those voices, it's like, are you like say deciding on things with like the showrunner, like the, executive producer, like who I guess is like maybe in that room or just kind of like that
Yeah, great
process?
question. So it could be the creator of the show and the lead executive from the network. And you can put forward your list of names and say, here's why this person, here's why this person, and maybe this person is quiet in the room, but a killer on the page. Maybe this person is really good on the page, but like they are a great idea generator in the room. So you have these different, you try to put a team together, like in sports, where people complement each other's strengths. And so
Hmm.
you want to consider that as well, because it's not just what's on the page, it's also in the room every week. And so
What's the
you want to,
dynamic of, yeah.
exactly. So you want to do your best to, and then this person's newer, but they have what it takes. I know this person's experienced, so they'll balance each other out, like all those things.
Right. Yeah. No, I guess that's really nice, like in a way to keep in mind of like, you're looking for that balance of like different voices and who can complement who and like newer versus more experienced. Like it's kind of creating this more well-rounded team versus like, okay, we're just, hiring the best of the best. And I think especially with a lot of, there's less rooms and rooms are shrinking, like that kind of fear of like, okay, there's not going to be opportunities for those up and coming writers. And sure, there's less opportunities than there used to be, but from what you're saying, at least, it sounds like there's still spaces for those people to come in and work their way up.
For sure. And you can't forget where you come from or how you started. I was that person trying to get in front of anyone. You have to give those shots to people because that's how I came up. That's how everybody comes up. So you can't forget that.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Last thing, like as we wrap up, what do you think the next generation of animation writers specifically needs to be thinking about that your generation maybe didn't have to consider, and the biggest advice you might leave them with?
Ooh, what a closer. The biggest. Okay, so I heard something really great on the podcast from a previous guest where I asked him something about what is as true now as it was when you were starting out. And he said that there's always disruption in the industry, whether it's film, it's film to TV, it's digital. There's always disruption to the medium, and storytelling changes. I was talking to another guest, and they said, "Gosh, from when I started, he's been in the game for like 30 years," and he said, "The longer I'm in the industry, the shorter the television shows get." He
Yeah.
started out writing 22 minutes, and now he's writing, 11 and then 7. And in my own career, my very first show was 22, and then it was 11. And then Cocomelon Lane, the show that I co-created, 7 minutes. I've written a bunch of different shorts that are like 1 minute. So I attention spans are dwindling, which is concerning.
Yeah.
But I think something that's important that we touched on earlier is that storytelling is still the most important thing. You have to be able to tell stories in whatever amount of time you're given. They're not clips, they're stories. And so whether it's 22 minutes, it's 11 minutes, it's 7 minutes, it doesn't matter. There's a beginning, middle, and end, and do your best to tell stories. And so while the medium can change and the length can change, I think the stories themselves, like, keep your eye on storytelling. And so I would offer that up as advice on what to hold as most important. And so, and again, with the rise of doing everything or more and more things yourself, and everyone has their own YouTube channel and they're making their own shorts or whatever, all that stuff is going to keep evolving and changing and disrupting. And who knows what's going to happen to movie theaters and all that, and streaming, all that stuff. But it's still about stories, because that's intrinsic to us as human beings. And so however the technology changes, just hold stories as high as possible in your mind as something that is worth getting better at and developing as your craft. And then you can adapt yourself in terms of the length, but just keep your eye on the storytelling.
Yeah. No, like, yeah, stories, like, I've always just been so ingrained in like being human and just everything, whether it be lessons and history, just everything. So like, yeah, it's like it's always going to change. There's always going to be new technology, but it's just, how do we still tell it with what we have and what we can work with?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beth, this was such a pleasure. I so appreciate you taking your time to do this.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for inviting me on and having me here. This was so great to be able to chat and ask some questions. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure other people are going to learn a lot too. So thank you.
Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If you want more episodes like this, make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. And while you're at it, grab my free guide, The Rule Breaker's Guide to Finding Your Creative Voice. It's a brutally honest roadmap I put together, built from the lessons, mistakes, and breakthroughs I've collected along my journey as a writer. You can download it for free at storyseriespodcast.com. See you in the next one.